The husband took out a pair of handcuffs and handcuffed his wife to the bed. Then he quickly swallowed a small pill, preparing to play some exciting little games with his wife. Unexpectedly, before they could even start, the husband suddenly started to hold his arms and chest, his whole body trembling. Then he collapsed onto his wife and became motionless. The wife mistakenly thought it was her husband's new trick, so she quickly tried to lift him up with her feet. However, the husband remained still and rolled backward, falling off the bed. The woman was shocked and quickly sat up, calling out to her husband repeatedly, but he lay on the ground without moving. She frantically tried to break free, but found the handcuffs were just the right size to jam them. No matter how much she struggled, it was futile. In desperation, the woman thought of calling the police, but found her phone on the table. She could only reach it with her foot, but she was always just a little short. Suddenly, she was horrified to see large amounts of blood gushing from her husband's head, quickly spreading outwards. Terrified, the woman screamed for help, hoping someone passing by would hear her. But she didn't know that her husband had deliberately chosen this secluded spot to avoid being disturbed. Soon it was evening, and the woman was exhausted. Then she heard a noise outside, and she saw Hope again. The woman was immediately excited and shouted for her husband to unlock the handcuffs. However, when she turned her head, she found that her husband was still lying on the ground. It turned out that the huge mental stimulation had caused her to begin to hallucinate. The sound of chewing filled her ears that he still needed to wake up. He had to find a way to save himself. Otherwise, even if he didn't starve to death, he would eventually be bitten to death by wild dogs. He mustered his courage, endured the pain, and was willing to break his hand bones to break free of the handcuffs. Unexpectedly, he succeeded. He hurriedly jumped off the bed and used all his strength to break the bed frame, successfully removing the handcuffs. The woman, overjoyed at surviving, headed towards the exit. But when she turned around, she found herself still sitting on the bed. It turned out that all of this was just her hallucination. The woman closed her eyes and tried to calm herself down. Now his only hope of escape was, she wanted to endure it longer until she was discovered, but now she was trapped. Even without food or water, she could only last for 3 days at most. How could she survive? Suddenly, she remembered that her husband had placed a glass of water on the wooden shelf above. The woman quickly reached out and lifted the inside of the wooden board. Soon, the glass, with half a glass of water remaining, fell out. Then, the woman lifted one side of the board, letting the glass slide slowly to the other side. She successfully got the glass. But before she could be happy, she found that because of the handcuffs, she couldn't reach the glass with her mouth. Helpless, the woman could only endure her thirst and put the glass back in its place. She tried to calm herself down. Suddenly, she remembered that not long ago, he placed the pajamas tag on the wooden shelf, reached out and found it. He rolled the tag into a tube and put it in his mouth. With the length of a straw, the woman successfully drank water, but she didn't dare drink too much, leaving half because she didn't know when she would be rescued. To conserve her energy, the woman decided to fall asleep as soon as possible. Soon she fell asleep. At midnight, the stray dog lying at the door seemed to have seen something, barked twice, and ran away. The woman was still asleep in bed, completely unaware of the impending danger. In the middle of the night, the woman was awakened by the dog's barking. She looked around and found a figure standing in the corner. The woman thought she was saved, but as the figure got closer, she found that the other person was actually a man with a rather, daring not to open her eyes again. The woman woke up the next day and suddenly felt that the soles of her feet were a little slippery. She kicked the stray dog away and sat up, but felt an unbearable pain all over her body. It turned out that her wrists had become constricted due to the pressure all night, causing blood to stagnate. The woman quickly rubbed her body to speed up blood circulation. After recovering, the woman looked around and found that her husband's body had begun to decompose due to the stray dog's bites and had attracted flies. Even more terrifying, a row of bloody footprints was left on the ground, which meant that the strange man from last night was likely real. The woman was terrified and knew she had to escape as soon as possible, otherwise it was hard to say whether she would survive the night. But there seemed to be no good way at the moment. Suddenly, she remembered the scene of her hand being pricked by a water cup when she was a child. Suddenly, she thought of a way to escape. She picked up the cup, poured out the water, and then smashed the cup. Then she picked out the sharpest piece and embedded it into the crack of the wooden board. Finally, the woman endured the pain and cut her own palm. It turned out that she had thought of, before the night solidifies, it can act as a lubricant. With this incredible maneuver, the woman successfully pulled her hand out. Then she quickly got out of bed and moved the bed half a meter to the left. She then used her foot to reach for the phone, but by this time the phone had already lost power and turned off. Helpless, she could only move the bed to the right. With her hand, which was now covered in grime, she grabbed the key and successfully unlocked the handcuffs. Then she immediately went to the sink, swallowed 2 large mouthfuls of water, and then gave the wound a simple bandage. Then he fixed his gaze on the car keys beside him, but due to excessive blood loss, his consciousness began to blur, and he fainted after taking only a few steps. He didn't know how much time had passed when he was awakened by the sound of wild dogs tearing at him. Looking down, he saw his husband's body, which was unrecognizable. He didn't have time to feel sorry for his husband's back. He hurriedly went to the table and pressed the car key. Fortunately, the car hadn't been changed. However, Just as he was about to leave, the wild dog seemed to be frightened by something and ran away with 2 whistles. The woman's face immediately turned solemn. She slowly walked towards the door. Sure enough, the strange man from last night was standing there. The woman had no choice but to obediently walk towards him. When she reached him, she touched the large drill sword in her hand. The woman could only force herself to stay awake, but then she seemed to see the strange man again in the rearview mirror. After some time, the woman woke up again and finally saw 2 figures flashing in the distance. She quickly honked the horn, and sure enough, the other person heard the noise and rushed towards her. The woman was successfully rescued. Afterwards, the woman called the police, but the strange man was never caught. And this strange man would forever remain in the woman's dreams.